Okay, everybody?
I am.
So, for the last talk of this particular session, before we move to the next talk, we've got Terry Filer from School of Management, who's going to talk about VR in auditing. I'm personally looking forward to it because I've heard a lot about this one, but I've never actually seen the presentation. So
It's the first time.
yes.
It's the first time. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I know I was chairing one of the sessions, and it's a pleasure. I know it's the last session, but I will try and make it lively if I can. Mind you, most people would say that auditing is not lively, but it can be. Okay, thanks for the introduction. Just to let you know, I teach tax, I teach financial accounting in the School of Management, and I'm head of department, so I've got quite a few things on my plate. But I think teaching students is, it's an inspiration for them to open their eyes to the subject, and hopefully, they will go on and, become auditors and accountants, tax specialists in the future. This specific intervention, this is my second test intervention, whatever way you want to call it, and again, I'm ably assisted, or it wouldn't happen without Mark, who is our technical expert here in the university. So in this scenario, we're looking at MSc students who are on a programme that's only been running for 1 year. This is a quick overview. I'm not going to go through each of the items there, but this was a programme that I introduced last year. So it's, if you like, a little bit of a pilot programme, so there is smaller numbers of students. So why have I thought of VR for auditing? As I say, this is my second VR experience. The first one was about tax, and I think I've covered that quite a lot of times in the past. But for auditing, auditors need to inquire. They are signing off sets of accounts to say that they have been prepared on a fair basis that show true and fair. So the figures in these financial statements are an accurate reflection of what's happened. And I come at that, at the beginning of term last year, we had the Monarch situation. So Monarch went into administration. I only had 100 students. I said, how many of you may have booked flights on Monarch? There were 3 students in the room who had booked flights from Monarch, and they'd lost their money. So I think, this is raised in the profile how important auditing is, because when we looked at the accounts, those accounts were signed off in August. It went bust in November. So, this resonated with a lot of people. So I'm trying to, make it real. So that's why I'm bringing in this particular scenario. So it's a simulation of auditing using a case study. And what I'm trying to do is to bring up real situations so that the students walk around their clients' premises, attending an inventory count, but there are problems. And those problems are in the situation, and they need to identify them. And as I said, it's homing in on what are the responsibilities of auditors. And once they've finished the exercise, they need to then provide recommendations to management. So this is where you're signing off as auditor. As I said, this is for a new programme. I put the programme together, but it's taught by my colleagues. And Leslie is the auditing lecturer, and she was quite keen for the students to get involved. I don't teach on that specific master's programme, but I wanted to get to know the students and be involved with them. And it does. It's a programme that gets them a master's, but at the same time as sitting our exams, a couple of weeks later, we're then preparing the students to sit professional examinations for ACCA. So at the end of 12 months, these students they get their master's, and hopefully if they pass their ACCA exams, they can be qualified accountants. So we are producing accountants for the future. And as I said, the idea is to give them an employer sort of situation through this exercise. Okay, the way I set it up was, because my colleague delivered the actual scenario, she's the auditing expert, I then became, if you like, the Mark, because Mark can't be everywhere. I did the technical, set up the phones and have all the headsets ready. But I also played the role of the client. So the students, once they'd been through the exercise, could then ask me questions. and I could, bring on that role and answer in a way I thought would help or not help the students, depending on how I wanted them to learn. And then we wrapped it up with my colleague, sort of saying the importance of the areas that we covered. Okay, so for delivery, I said it's in inventory, so this is, you can have a little look at this at the end of the session. I've got four headsets here. I visited Hancock and Brown. It is builders merchants, it's just down Fabian Way. They were lovely. They said, come in, take what you like. So I set up with my Samsung gear on a tripod, took the photos on my own, hid out the way so you don't get the cut and paste, so minimising effort. And I went through and did about 12, 14 of these photographs. And then Mark then went through the software and added in some comments, some prices and some comments. So that this, for example, in one of the scenarios there's a whole shelf full, I say shelf, it's a bit heavier than that, of planks of wood. I mean, it's so realistic, you can almost smell the sawdust in the place. And we were saying that outside there's a lorry with another load of wood on it. Now, if you're a student thinking, how am I going to cope with that? Do I include it in this count or do I not? So we were building in scenarios. Another good one was the padlocks. These padlocks were £62 each. This is real, this is real prices. And I said the keys were missing. Now for auditors, what do? You've got those in, let's say you've got a box full or a display full of these padlocks, and that could be £100,000, £200,000. If you didn't change that figure, you are then overstating inventory. That makes a big difference to the bottom line. So real scenarios, they had to think and decide what they were going to do. And then, as I said, I was then the managing director, and they could ask me questions. And I did have quite a good answer for the no keys on the padlocks. You can ask me later. Okay, so role play came into it as well. Okay, so I think you've already heard quite a lot about this. How do we go about it? It's an app, APK app, loaded onto the mobile phone. Because I found it easier, most of our students, believe it or not, have Apple phones. So trying to get things into the Apple Store is time consuming and a little bit cumbersome, so we used the phones we already had. This is a small group. There's 11, or there were 12 students on the in the cohort. So by pairing up, and as Mark has already said, by accident, we paired students up. That has the benefit that they're working in teams, so they're getting the benefit of having a team effect. You're also stopping, one is stopping the other one walking into things, which does happen as well. But then one is writing, like you would in the real world. One is walking and looking, and one is taking notes down. So that was the benefit of sharing. And with it, we then use the Bobo headsets, which are these, which then gives them, I think, a better experience than the Google Cardboard. Okay, so as I said, students working in pairs. These are Chinese students just having a try of the it wasn't the full scenario, but they thoroughly enjoyed it as well. The seminar room is flat-based. It was in Nanhuffer, so it's flat room, which is helpful because trying to see students in this scenario was quite scary. Okay, it is pedagogic research, so I set this up with some questionnaires at the beginning. The way I did this was to have the clickers in School of Management. All the students have clickers. We used to use it for attendance, but now we just use it for part of our delivery. So these are the questions I asked at the beginning. So how would you describe your knowledge of auditing inventory at this point? These are master's students. They would have had auditing instruction in their undergrad program, so some of them felt confident. Some had studied it, but some time ago, so they were the ones that were not quite so sure. Okay, and there's no other in this first one. So, they knew a little bit about auditing and inventory. And then we asked, how do you think that VR is going to help your understanding? And, the list here, I'm saying yes, no, is trying to tailor as best as I can. But they basically thought, some of them thought, a third of them thought it would. Most of them didn't know. And then some of them said they were looking forward to it, but open-minded. Interesting, and we've seen this in sort of some of the other presentations, that they'd not used the technology before. And I had some of the discussions, how much of this is sort of novelty. This is the first time the students have ever seen this. But, so they hadn't used it before. And if they had, most of them had not used it in an educational sort of environment. Okay, so that's the first 3. Then they did the exercise. And then I asked some more sort of clicker questions. I use the clicker questions because it's easy to gather the information afterwards through Turning Point is the software we use. Did it enhance your learning? All 11 of those students said yes. They really did enjoy it. Yes, and they said it was fun and they enjoyed getting, sort of involved in the exercise virtually. Do they think it'd be better without VR? There was one person who did feel slightly, sickly from it, a bit dizzy, but all the others thought it was fantastic and they would like to see more of it. Interesting, because this is my second sort of VR experience. They all want to see VR in the subjects they find difficult, which then sort of racks your brain. And these, the main comments in here, they would like to see more of it for financial accounting. So it's trying to come up with the scenario that fits in that sort of, to help them. So they obviously thought it helps their understanding, and that's why they want to apply it to more difficult subjects. So, I would say that yes, it was, a good intervention. I only did it was in a 3-hour sort of slot. These students are block taught. So I had full 3 hours, so I could take my time. And, we did. We had the setup in the beginning. We had the first hour. And then I brought in the VR. And then we had another, say, 45 minutes where we were sort of mopping it all up afterwards and discussing. And I think having 2 people there, one focusing on, as I said, the VR side, one focusing on the learning, made such a difference. Because you're not then so tense about making everything happen at the same time. And bearing in mind, in this scenario, I only had 5 headsets to deal with, or 5 or 6 headsets. So these are the comments that the students are making. So it was great. It makes you dizzy. We've seen this, no matter how hard you try. And the sad thing is, I find, is those students who are so enthusiastic are the ones that feel dizzy, because they are, you can see some people are a little bit skeptical and they're cautious. They may sit and they'll take their time. But those that love it are immersed and they go into a different world altogether. But those are the ones that sadly feel a little bit dizzy. Okay, and this lady, I think here, was saying that it's best to use it at the end and not at the middle, because she felt the need to sit down and relax. Makes her feel uncomfortable. Okay, here they are actually using it. They did all sign for GDPR case, where they all signed saying, yes, we could use the photographs. So you can see them all working together in pairs. One's writing and one is using the headset. I may have told some of you, I went to China and there was a group of up to about 170 students in 20 students' sort of workshops. And there were 2 or 3 students that could put the headset on and write at the same time. Don't ask me how they did it. I'm going to try it, but it came natural to them. I didn't say give it a go, they just wanted to do it. Amazing. We'll never keep up with them. Okay, so here's some other things. Again, enjoy the interaction and a little bit dizzy. Better VR machine. I didn't think we could get any better because our technology is really good. But clearly some of them think it's still, this still makes them feel dizzy. Makes it more funny? I'm not quite sure what that means. But, they do interact. It's more relaxed. The whole atmosphere is more relaxed because of VR. And for me, my next sort of step is, how much is VR bringing the fact that you're on your feet and you're in a more relaxed environment and you're able to sort of react in a different way to a lecture? So how much of that is due to this spatial and being able to move around? That's something I want to explore next, I think. Okay, some people again, said, we shouldn't spend too much time. Might spend lots of time to do it. I'm not quite sure what they're trying to get there, but again, making sure the equipment works is quite important, to make it adjusting. So it's the same group, and a couple of students there using it. One of them, I'll show you later, it was quite funny what he did. Okay, again, they appreciated the fact they were going through a real world scenario. And for me, this is the opportunity to train accountants ready for the world of work. I just think, they need these softer skills. The employers are saying they don't want somebody to sort of work in the back somewhere. They want the students to be able to, to get their hands in and understand what to do. So these softer skills, talking to client, and I've learned, like you all, a lot of new skills today to try and draw that out to students, so that our students go into the world of work sort of really well prepared. So the more of these case studies we do, the better and more confident they're going to be as accountants in practice. Okay, again, one thought it may have been adjusting the headset there. Okay, real world reality. In the other VR exercise I did, it was about tax, and they could see the real values of things, and they didn't appreciate the value of certain items. So again, that's bringing real life to students who've never experienced it before. Okay, they liked the fact that they could put theory into practice. This was an interesting concept. Whether it stopped him from feeling sick, I don't know, but he also didn't trip into anybody. He's the only one that's ever done that. Okay, so again, they were saying they like it and they enjoy it. This is the theory, the pedagogic research that's sort of underlying this. So I will produce a paper on this area in the near future. So just to conclude, it was enjoyable. As instructors, we enjoy doing it too. And it is real world. And as I said, the main thing, the students would like to see more of it in those areas that they find more difficult. And financial accounting is quite a difficult area. And pairing worked really well. So, to make sure that we safeguard them, we were talking health and safety, earlier, then, that does stop them hurting themselves. Because you do get so immersed, you forget. I do it myself. I sit in the office on my swivel chair and I bang my knees all the time. But that does help. So rather than, I think Mark and I were in a lecture theatre, weren't we? And somebody went at the top and decided to put it on, and we carefully took her down the front. Yes. You'll be happier here. But that's sometimes how the students, get engrossed and they enjoy it thoroughly. But I hope that was sort of useful, to perhaps bring it into your own practices. And thank you for your attention. But if you would like to have a look at these afterwards, feel free. So happy for questions.
Do we have any questions from Sarah?
I've got one for me coming from the engineering background. I can see hosts of possibilities in engineering where we can use VR. I wouldn't have thought of how you've used it, but now it makes perfect sense. Can you identify any sort of future possibilities within financial accounting, tax and inventory where you can use VR?
Yeah,
Repeat the question.
Sorry. Oh, yes, sorry. So the question was, where can we utilise VR for other areas of accounting? Okay. Right, so what I've done in the first exercise then, which was last November, was looking at capital allowances. And this is where I got my first idea from a conference, and thought, yes, I'm going to do this for capital allowances. But my initial reaction was to try and use a film, because I'm not computer literate at all. And by accident, we had a pedagogic event in accounting and finance. And Pat, who was here earlier, said, you must speak too. And then along came Paul Holland, and then I got introduced to Mark, and then we went off and put something which was an awful lot more professional. But capital allowances is where you're looking at assets, trying to see where you can claim capital allowances and reduce your tax bill. So you're looking at assets. 200 students, I cannot go and take them to places, so they cannot access plant rooms. I went on top of the roof up onto engineering where all the solar panels are. You can't take students up there. But you can get this real world experience through doing this. But at the moment, yes, I'm on assets, whereas today people have been talking about people interactions. That's next. But I've got lots of ideas. And really, all my questions that I do in seminars, I could turn those into some sort of case study, which instead of being paper, can be either video or VR, But then my question is, will I wear it out? Will it become, oh, you not this again? And I don't want that to happen. Anybody perhaps have any thoughts on that? Will we get to that stage? Oh, do we have to do that again this week? What do you think?
I don't know. I think the technology will keep on advancing. And
Okay, it'll just get better.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So don't hold back.
No.
Okay.
I think it will. I think it will become less exciting. I mean, it definitely will. But I think it's still a really good, more powerful learning experience. So, I think there's still a lot of value.
Yeah, and it's still early. I think for tax, I don't think anybody else is doing tax for VR. So, it's novelty for the students.
I think when like AI gets in there properly with VR, that would be like a whole different.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, there's so much scope. If you think of the clients you will have,
Yeah.
either for financial accounting or tax, you can go on a farm, you can even go to a nuclear reactor, you can go, well, I'm not going there, but somebody will go there, I'm sure, or get a drone in there to do it. It's endless. But I suppose the only thing holding you back is your own creativity. But it's fun, it's enjoyable, so it's good.
Steve, sorry, I'll ask Steve and I'll come back to you, Sarah.
Okay.
Only because I'm conscious that anyone watching this on VR is going to be really frustrated. You're going to have to answer the key question
What's that?
on the padlocks.
Yeah.
Oh, the padlocks! Oh, right. Right. No, so I don't want them to adjust it too much. What did I say? The drawer is full of keys. So basically, they were useful. It's just some poor soul has got to sit there and work through this drawer and put them on every single padlock. But they had to ask the question, because if they didn't know, then those padlocks had to come off. And it was substantial. It was like 40% of the total value of inventory. So there you go. And, inventory, closing inventory, reduces costs of sales, so it actually increased the profit. So it's making that business look far better than it really was. But if you've got to throw them all away, So this is trying to bring real world in.
I'm going to ask the other question because I've forgotten the answer. You did tell me before. What is the thing with the trucks? The wood on the truck?
The truck.
There was the truck with
Yeah,
wood
you
behind
include
it.
the
The rule 9.
Oh, yes. Okay, the question was then, for the purposes of virtual, what did we do with the truck? The timber that's been left on the truck outside. Had it been included in the inventory? So if it just arrived on the back of a truck, was it included? Is it going to be included in the inventory? Yes or no? Because if it was, then obviously it would increase the value of inventory, and therefore profit would come down. Okay.
Question?
Yeah.
I was interested that you're saying they want this for their hard subjects, as mentioned financial accounting. I don't really know anything about the subject area, but I would guess a lot of that hard, the difficult stuff is not necessarily the experiential being out there. It's the maths, it's the spreadsheets. Now, I wondered if there might be a little bit of a risk here that actually you're teaching really important skills, experiential skills out there, but students get pulled away from some of the challenging, mathematical stuff that actually VR is terrible at teaching at the moment. Maybe we'll have really good ways of teaching in the future, but I don't think we can teach. Do you see that as a risk?
Right. Just to give a little bit more detail about financial accounting, it isn't maths.
Okay.
Right? Financial accounting is a set of rules. So it's a bit, my colleagues in finance will say, oh, it's law. It's law. I said, it's not law. It's rules and regulations. So if I want to put in an asset in the balance sheet, you all heard of a balance sheet, I would possibly put a value of X on it, although somebody else would take a different approach in how you produce that, and they come up with a different answer. But it could be exactly the same asset. So difficult. I am racking my brain. I will come up with a way of putting some financial accounting in there, but what the students have to do is produce financial accounts. Auditors are auditing financial statements that are already there to say that they are properly prepared. So it's how you apply, the accounting standards, and then how each business, their accounting policies meet then the requirements. And now that we've got international reporting standards. So I will come up with some scenarios, but it is challenging. But I don't know, you are right, I don't know if it will add to the actual learning, because a lot of this is actually doing it. It's like doing, let me think. It's not writing an essay, it's just putting together workings. It isn't formula, but it is actually producing something, which is difficult in VR.
Yeah, I think I was interested in Mohammed's talk on the ward rounds earlier, because he said that I didn't quite get what was documenting, which sounded more like the bookwork thing, was worse in VR than in PowerPoint. I think for a long time, some of these kind of, the things you can learn from books are going to be better learned from books. So.
But what you can learn from there is, if you were going to be an accountant, you're going to be explaining to others, like say the board of directors, how an accounting policy applies to the situation. So that is very, very appropriate for VR, because if you're not convincing that you're doing it in the right way, then that will come up very clearly through your own sort of presentations. So yes, it could lend itself that way. Hope that answers the question. Yeah? Okay.
I was asked a quick one. So I used to pay good money to go to the fun fair and get dizzy when I was a kiddie. And it's a light-hearted question, but I know it's got a very serious connotation really, because we don't know what health risks people have and things like that. So in terms of risk assessment, is that a problem? And I was kind of asking Mark as well as yourself.
So come and answer this one.
Ooh, please.
I'll use the stand. Okay, so the reason why this dizziness is happening is several. First is interpuparial distance. So we use fixed Google Cardboards, which have a central 63 millimeters, because that's what the Army's interpuparial distance is, but that's warped because Army men have high level and women have higher levels of testosterone than people who are not. So estrogen reduces interpuparial distance as you grow old. So if it's high levels. So we got one student here which was down to 49 millimeters. So that's well outside of the interpuparial distance of a standard Google Cardboard. These Bobos will go down to 55 millimeters. Yeah, these ones will go to. These ones are about 6. I think this one's a 60 technically. You can build custom ones of these, so we're looking at that next year. Second issue is what you call 3 degrees of freedom. As long as the people who you're saying getting most sick are those who insist on walking. And it's a 3 degrees of freedom, so it's just about head rotation. It's not about physically walking around this area. So they walk around and they start getting sick because they're moving forward and their brain is not seeing the update it's meant to be seeing. So it's a mismatch in your movement, which is where motion sickness is coming from. I've been trying to keep my mouth shut because I don't want to add myself to more work. But what we can do is look into doing photogrammetry or looking at three-dimensional models instead, so we can actually use a 6 degree of freedom headset like we do with the mixed reality headsets, or maybe look at one of the newer headsets which are coming out, because we do have budget to buy some replacement. There's the Oculus Go, which is still 3 degrees of freedom. Santa Cruz is meant to be coming out, and there's also Mirage and others which are 6 degrees of freedom. So when they insist on walking around, they can actually get that motion. Apparently there's less motion sickness because of that, but I still think motion sickness as a problem probably isn't solved, and these are just things which can help. I'm sure if you probably, Dan is probably looking at me and telling me, thinking there's a whole pile more to this motion sickness than what I'm just saying, but that's what we're finding, what you call at the moment. Yeah.
Can I add to something on there?
Yeah.
I went on holiday to Australia, right? And obviously I'm interested in VR. And my kids, we went on a roller coaster. You can imagine roller coasters now, they go upside down and twist and all that. They had a VR, so your body's doing this and you're looking at something else. Personally, I couldn't do it, but something in me wants to do it just to see what it's like. Now, have they risk assessed that? I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Sometimes we get a little bit too worried, but then again, I'm not into that area that I understand the health and the risks for other people. So
Yeah.
Sorry, can you go this way?
Hi, I'm from an optometry background.
Yeah.
It's just occurring to me listening to the talks today that virtual reality is all based on what you can see through using these apps. And if we're talking about using it in education, we need to be fair and equitable and make it available to all students. And I'm just wondering on students with not necessarily visual impairment, but a lazy eye, which is very, very common, so you're not seeing through both eyes.
Yeah.
How accessible, or is it going to be usable?
So I'm going to ask to trade your card, because I'm looking for somebody who's actually wants to do research and work into this, because I can't at this point do any, make any of this mandatory. There are drop-down versions of all these apps to run on just a PC, just to look around, because we can't make it mandatory right now. And ironically, the people who are guests, so you get some people with vision problems who actually find it easier because of the limited FOV and the the sweet spot in the middle. They actually find it easier to use. Whereas we're getting people who have no vision problems suddenly finding they can't use it because of the way the headsets are built. There's a male bias coming from Silicon Valley, male developers building headsets for males, and primarily also financial bias as well, because when you look at the premium headsets, they're building for people who have graphics cards who are unfortunately male because of a continuing male bias towards video games. So I would love to do research into this, and if you want to do a trade of cards, then we can see what we can do on it. I want to do some more. I've got a student project looking into testosterone and estrogen effects on depth perception, and I've got another one looking into headset design, because Google Cardboard's relatively easy to make, and then we're going to see what we can do with the more advanced headsets with the Steam VR kits. So we'd love to look at that.
I'm being a bad chair, but I have two quick questions, if that's all right. We've got to be next door in 5 minutes.
It was more an observation about the motion sickness, the idea of health safety implications, I think, is amongst many one of the reasons that Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, was plumbed for AR, not for VR.
AR has even worse motion sickness problems.
Yes.
Because the frame rates you have to achieve really sometimes even higher.
Okay, and last question then.
I just wanted to sort of jump in a little bit on the vision impairment side, particularly lazy eyes, that the fact that you've got two screens and it's sort of stereoscopic seems a really obvious component of VR, but actually the head tracking, the fact that it moves your head, and also 3D audio are also equally important parts. So I think
3D audio is something we completely ignored. We haven't done any work on that at all yet, so it's something probably to look into.
But possibly to answer your question, we haven't had students with a disability, so we haven't had to grapple with it, even though the tax class were 200 students. I didn't overcome it. The only issues were, as we said, the sort of the narrowness. But it may come.
You did look at your... Yeah, I'd asked Wendy and you to both look, and there was... Well, Wendy had one. Wendy had one person who I've actually got his name, to try and do more testing with him in the future. Okay. But I'm not exactly sure of his condition, but you didn't have any, and neither did Wendy. And I did ask Xavier, and she managed not to have any. But there are more special needs students coming towards universities, and we need to make sure that they're incorporated. Now, some of those are physical disabilities, and VR is freeing to them. Others will have to make sure that they're incorporated. So at the moment we're relying on drop-down apps to on a computer screen with blown-up screens and stuff like that. But it's not... I would prefer to be able to see what we can actually do with VR, actually, to make changes to these headsets so that they're actually more suitable for them.
Okay. It's dangerous becoming a panel discussion, which is obviously needed because everyone wants to chat. But can we just have another round of applause for Terry? Great talk.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
So now